It is good to be together. It is good to be together. Of course, it's Larry's family that's causing trouble in the back, but that's okay. This is the right kind of trouble. We have been for some time kind of carving out this space around 12:30ish on Shabbat afternoons to have various conversations. Sometimes they have been often focused around Israel in this past year, and different aspects of it, from national security issues, the political arena, and also using these spaces for other broader conversations as well that we've been having. And so happy that Larry Sidman is going to be our speaker today. Larry, there is no greater lover of Israel than Larry Sidman. It is true. I mean, there's Ben Gurion, and then there is Larry Sidman soon after. In my office, I have these little bobbleheads of the Zionists, so there's Golda Meir and Jabotinsky and Ben Gurion, and I'm going to get one made for Larry Sidman as well. So, but Larry, from the moment that I came to the synagogue a while ago, Larry has just been an advocate of Israel, of engaging us in conversations around Israel, and is a dynamic leader and teacher, passionate teacher, which is not his profession, unless you call educating people on Capitol Hill how to do something in telecommunications or other areas, and supporting Israel. So without further ado, Larry Sidman.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Thank you, Rabbi Harris, for providing me this opportunity to offer some ideas that might strengthen Jewish bonds as we move forward. And I really appreciate that very generous introduction. I don't know what to do. Thank you as well to congregants and friends, including a special friend, Harley Gordon, who came from Boston, to visit me. Incidentally, he also visited his grandchildren. And I appreciate so much your indulgence, since many of you have spent much of the last 3 weeks in Shul. This is the first Shabbat following Simchat Torah, the most joyous holiday in the Hebrew calendar, now linked forever with the Hamas massacre last Simchat Torah, the worst day in Jewish history since the Holocaust. Many rabbis, including our own, as well as Bethel's president, Sarah Gordon, have spoken about the importance of finding joy amidst the continuing sorrow of, as they say in Israel, dancing again. Jewish joy, however, extends beyond individual or even familial happiness to encompass communal joy. As we continue to mourn the deaths of 1,200 Israelis murdered by Hamas so ruthlessly last October 7th, continue to pray for the return of the hostages and wish for peace. How do we move from darkness to light? Rabbi Harris's Rosh Hashanah sermon called for a new paradigm for Jewish relationships, especially between American and Israeli Jews. This talk attempts to build on his fine foundation. Its title borrows from the title of Theodore Herzl's 1902, think about that, utopian novel, Alt New Land, or Old New Land, that set forth his vision for a new Jewish state in Eretz Yisrael. A threshold question is, what is missing today from Jewish relationships? I'm reminded of the story of the rabbi and the priest who were sitting next to each other on a train. They started chatting. Soon the priest reached into his bag and took out a ham sandwich. He asked the rabbi if he would like some. The rabbi declined politely. The priest said, "That's a shame. You don't know what you're missing." About a half hour passed. The priest, still hungry, pulled out a cheeseburger from his bag. Again, trying to be friendly, he asked the rabbi if he would like half the cheeseburger. Again, the rabbi gently declined. The priest remarked, "Too bad. You don't know what you're missing." As the train pulled into the station, the priest saw the rabbi's face light up. "Why are you smiling?" asked the priest. The rabbi replied, "Do you see the lovely, caring woman on the platform waving? She is my wife. You don't know what you're missing." No, sex is not what is missing from the American or Israeli diaspora Jewish relationship. What is missing is a paradigm that creates a sense of renewed brotherhood and sisterhood, a common bond that transcends ideological and religious differences. I respectfully submit to you that there is one overarching idea, one that is capable of galvanizing, energizing, and unifying all Jews. That new old paradigm is that Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, and derivatively, the modern state of Israel, are central to Jewish identity. At this moment, some of you were thinking, we know Larry is getting older, but I guess he finally lost it. After all, we're living at a time when Israel is so corrosive among American Jews that even many rabbis will not discuss it in their sermons. We exist in a climate of rampant and increasingly violent anti-Semitism that has surged in the wake of Israel's war against Hamas and Hezbollah. Is it not completely counterintuitive to propose that the solution is to place Israel at the center of Jewish identity? At first blush, the answer is yes. Deeper examination, however, reveals just the opposite. Jewish religion and the history of the Jewish people, studied, taught, and viewed through one integrated lens, leads ineluctably to the conclusion that the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, and now, after 2,000 years of statelessness, the modern state of Israel, are inextricably intertwined with Jewish identity. With your permission, I offer the tiniest fraction of the abundant evidence supporting that proposition, or as Talmud scholars would say, the proofs. The Torah, the basic religious text of the Jewish people, is anchored in its relationship to a specific place, Canaan, Eretz Yisrael. The third parsha in Breshit, which we just started today, the first book of the Torah, is Lech Lecha, in which God instructs Abraham to leave his native Ur and go to a land that, quote, I shall show you. The last parsha, Ha'azinu, describes the land of Canaan through the eyes of Moses standing on Mount Nebo before he dies. The Torah narrative may be characterized as the difficult and circuitous journey of the Jewish people to reach Canaan. The balance of the Tanakh, the books of prophets and writings, describes the triumphs and tragedies of the Jewish people in centuries after they reach Canaan. Viewed as a whole, religion and history merge in the conquest of Canaan by Joshua, the reigns of Kings David and Solomon, and the prophecies of Jeremiah and Isaiah foreshadowing and documenting the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians. We think of the famous line in Psalm 137, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim, tishkach yibidi, tidbak lishori lechiki, im lo ezkarechi. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. Let my tongue cleave to my mouth, roof of my mouth, if I do not remember thee. It is no surprise then that Jewish religious practices through millennia are uniquely tied to a specific location, Zion, Yerushalayim. When we take out the Torah from the ark, we recite, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, u'devar Hashem miYerushalayim. From Zion the Torah comes, and the word of God from Jerusalem. In the Amidah, we ask, Matai timloch b'tzion, b'karov b'yameinu le'olam va'ed, titgadal v'titgarash, b'toch Yerushalayim ircha. Let it soon be in our day and throughout all time. May you be exalted and sanctified in Jerusalem when you rule in Zion. I assure you that neither Rabbi Harris nor Rabbi Migdal paid me to urge you to come to shul more often to learn Tanakh. But it's a good starting place for this new old paradigm. If you cannot make it every week, consider reading a very breezy and fun book by Martin Fletcher, a former NBC correspondent, called Walking Israel, overlaying the biblical travels of our ancestors on modern Israel. One of the dominant themes in the Tanakh is the waxing and waning of the fortunes of the people of Israel, depending upon whether they walk in God's ways, obeying the commandments and laws, or depart from them. This graphic linkage of historical fate to religious observance is documented most starkly in the last 5 parshas of Deuteronomy, the last book of the Torah. There, in his final orations and poems for the Jewish people, Moses sets forth the blessings and the curses that will befall the people of Israel, dependent upon their conduct. The oscillating cycle of blessings and curses to be visited upon the Jewish people is eerily predictive of the 2,000 years of stateless Jewish history, from the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans in 70 AD to the establishment of the modern state of Israel in 1948. Regardless of the ruling empire or country, the cycle of national blessings and curses was reenacted. Reasonably tolerant times, and even times of Jewish prosperity and relative power, gave way to incremental calamity, commencing with discrimination and the imposition of legal restrictions, and continuing to persecution, expulsion, and execution. The history of the Jews in Muslim-controlled lands from the 8th through the 12th centuries, in Northern and Western Europe during the Crusades, in Spain from the 11th through the 15th centuries, in Eastern Europe and the Russian Empire from the 16th to the 19th centuries, and most horrifically in Austria and Germany, culminating in the Holocaust, all reflect this tragic pattern. Against this background, it is not surprising that mid-19th century European rabbis such as Judah Bibas, Yehuda Alkali, and Tzvi Kalisher, often referred to as proto-Zionists, laid the foundation for political Zionism. Theodor Herzl's 1896 pamphlet, The Jewish State, and his leadership of the First World Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland in 1897, transformed these rabbis, merged religious and historical scholarship into political Zionism. Thus was born the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. Just as Herzl looked to the biblical Jewish homeland of Eretz Yisrael as a rational geopolitical solution to the tragic vicissitudes of nearly 2,000 years of Jewish statelessness, this talk suggests that the Jewish path forward after October 7 should rest upon a vigorous reaffirmation of the indispensable role of Eretz Yisrael in Jewish religion and history. Now that the modern state of Israel exists, the commitment of Kol Yisrael, all of the Jewish people, to its continued existence as a sovereign, independent homeland for the Jewish people should be an irreducible common ground for all Jews. By embracing the modern state of Israel as central to Jewish identity in the 21st century, we can forge together stronger, more understanding and empathetic bonds between diaspora and Israeli Jews, and more tolerance among American Jews for divergent views about Israel. We can come closer to fulfilling the obligation that all Jews are responsible for one another. Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh B'Zeh. So how do we get from our polarized present to our unified future, based upon Israel as central to Jewish identity? The people of Israel are often referred to as the people of the book, Am HaSefer. Through the centuries, learning and education have been prized Jewish values. Let me suggest that we must recommit to educating ourselves, our children and our grandchildren, L'dor Vador, about the primacy of Zion, Eretz Yisrael, and today the modern state of Israel in our religion and in our history, and its centrality to Jewish identity. To do so effectively, it may be necessary to reimagine Jewish education here and in Israel. All too often, we teach Jewish religion and history as separate subjects. Jewish religious education tends to focus on the Jewish holidays, biblical figures, and stories and moral precepts. Jewish history is usually learned and taught as a separate subject, often distant and unrelated, the relevance of which may be unclear. What if we abandon the siloed approach to Jewish religion and history and instead teach them as one intertwined, seamless whole, with Zion, the land of Canaan, Eretz Yisrael, being the connective tissue? What if we view our biblical heroes not just from a religious point of view, but from an historical and anthropological perspective as well? As I hope that much of this talk illustrates, such an approach would give us the tools to strengthen the American and Israeli Jewish communities in our common response to current threats. For example, we are bleeding figuratively and literally, here and in Israel, from the false narrative that depicts Israel as a largely white, post-World War II, colonial oppressor enterprise that has subjugated and displaced indigenous Palestinians who alone have a legitimate claim to the land of Israel, quote, from the river to the sea. That's what we're hearing. Our lived religious and historical experience enables us to deconstruct and rebut almost word for word that counterfactual and delegitimizing narrative. Our history and religion, supported by archaeological findings established beyond dispute, that Jews are indigenous to the land of Yisrael. And therefore, indigenous people can't be settlers. It teaches that the striving for the reestablishment of the state of Israel has been a centuries-long fight, not just after the Holocaust, against colonial powers, from the biggest historical ones, the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, okay, and most recently, the British. It teaches that political Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people, having its origins long before Frantz Fanon coined that term with regard to Algeria in 1962. It teaches that the origins are in European and Russian pogroms grown out of religious intolerance and hatred, nearly a century before the Holocaust. It teaches that a majority of Israeli Jews today are Mizrahi, refugees and their descendants from Arab lands where their ancestors had lived for centuries before being expelled, either consecutively or slightly thereafter, after Israel declared its independence in 1948. Even more fundamentally, the paradigm of Eretz Yisrael and the modern state of Israel, as central to Jewish identity, undermines efforts to sanitize anti-Zionism by drawing a distinction between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. The dramatic increase in quantity and ferocity of Jew hatred, especially on college campuses, and the proliferation of Nazi symbolism to both defame and intimidate Jews is powerful evidence that anti-Zionism literally has bled into much more classical forms of anti-Semitism. To get us from the darkness of division to the light of unity also will require us to embrace very intentionally the attributes of courage, strength, resilience, and humility. Once again, we can look to our Jewish religion and history for inspiration. Moses and Esther personified the courage of confronting those who had enslaved or would destroy our ancestors. David, Deborah, and the Maccabees displayed the strength and courage of the battlefield leader against all odds. Ruth epitomized resilience. Moses was the quintessential humble leader. The intervening millennia of Jewish history are replete with leaders who displayed those qualities, as we read on Yom Kippur during the Eila Ezkara part of the service. We have seen these character strengths on display in Israel in the wake of October 7. Notwithstanding intense internal political differences, the Israeli people have come together to help each other and essentially replace the government in providing essential services. The IDF has demonstrated incredible battlefield courage and bravery after the overconfidence and miscalculations that sadly contributed to the death toll of the Hamas attack. Similarly, hundreds of thousands of American Jews have rallied in support of Israel's right to defend itself, lobbied elected officials to continue the flow of arms essential for Israel to survive the existential ring of fire lit by Iran that surrounds Eretz Yisrael, and contribute billions of dollars. Apparently, Israel bonds this year raised $3 billion in Israel's time of need. This is a remarkable and encouraging display of solidarity between American and Israeli Jews. Let me be clear. This plea for Jewish unity around the centrality of Israel to Jewish identity is not a call for the cessation of justifiable criticism of the current Netanyahu government or its policies. On the contrary, it may impel us to join millions of Israelis seeking a change in Israel's government, insisting on repudiation of racist demagogues and calling for a rededication to the principles of justice and equality so eloquently and memorably expressed in Israel's Declaration of Independence. But that criticism must not extend to opposition to the state of Israel itself. To do so would be to deny the indivisibility of Eretz Yisrael and the modern state of Israel and Jewish identity. And it must not manifest itself as supporting America's withdrawing and withholding of weapons essential to Israel's defense. We also need to muster a different kind of courage, the moral courage, also drawn from religion, to acknowledge the suffering and death of so many who are truly innocent Palestinians in the terrible war in Gaza. We must search within our souls for the compassion and mercy to help them heal. In doing so, perhaps we also will help them to reject at last, not only for our sake, but for their sake. The Islamic rejectionism, first Sunni back in 1948, and now Shia, of the existence of the State of Israel that has been the core of this conflict since 1948. The determination to be courageous, strong, and resilient must be accompanied by humility, as the ebb and flow of Jewish history between triumph and tragedy reflects. Calamity has relentlessly followed the apparent, but ultimately illusory zenith of Jewish power and influence in societies across the millennia. We must avoid arrogance as we advocate. Finally, we must cling to hope and instill the importance of hope in our children, grandchildren, and each other. Hope is the key to our resilience as a people. It is the key to once again finding communal joy across all Jews, Israeli, American, within Israel, within America. No wonder that Hatikva, hope, is the national anthem of the State of Israel. I now invite you to rise and join me in the chanting of Hatikva as we pray and hope for peace. And for those of you who haven't totally memorized it, I think it's on page 448 of the Lev Shalem Sidur. Kol or balev al penima nefesh Yehudi homiya ulafate mizrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia O lo avda tikvatenu ha-tikva bat shnot alpayim liyotam chofshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim liyotam chofshi Be'artzenu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim. Shabbat Shalom, and I'm happy to take any questions or engage in discussion as anybody wishes, with the clergy and anybody.
Yeah, so why don't we introduce yourself first, and then a question, not a statement. What?
I'm Rita Newman, and I'm a very strong Zionist and support Israel with all my heart and contributions over the years. But I want to question how we can justify Israel's, the people who came to Israel after spending 40-odd years in the desert, finding other peoples living there before them and engaging in warfare with them as though this is their country when the other people were there before, after receiving the Ten Commandments containing one, thou shalt not kill. It reminds me of the colonization of the United States, and now they're talking about how to give money to the Indians who live there. Can you help me to deal with this, because it comes to my mind all the time. How can we justify this?
Well, I'll tell you what, Rabbi Harris has been kind enough, since it's largely a biblical question, I could offer my 2 cents, but I yield to our beloved and distinguished rabbi.
So Rita, thank you for just to repeat it, Rita's asking a biblical question, not in the past millennia, but in the Bible, as we just read on Simchat Torah yesterday in the Haftarah, in Joshua, we're entering the land. We conclude with Deuteronomy, but we don't enter the land until the book of Joshua. And one of the things in Joshua and Judges, it talks about conquering the land. And so that means that there were already people there. The Torah doesn't say to eradicate everyone that is there. It is clear from Joshua, Judges, Kings, Samuel, all along that the ancient Israelites are attempting to coexist with people that are in the land. So it is not the characterization of the Israelites, the ancient Israelites, going and throwing everyone out is a mischaracterization, because actually all of Nevi'im and Ketuvim is the coexistence of the Israelites with the people that are there in the land. That continues to be our hope throughout time. So I hope that answers the biblical question.
In a way it does, but we talked about this is our land upon coming there, like we possess it, while these other people were there the whole time. And I went to yeshiva and I learned the Bible, and it was supposed to be the world was desolate, and God created the heaven and the earth.
Yeah. So Rita, so let me just comment and then we'll move on, because you can hear from me any Shabbos. That the idea is, I characterize it like this: it's unique or exclusive. Okay, unique or exclusive, right? That there are unique responsibilities to us as the Jewish people. Okay, but we do not have an exclusive relationship with God. We have a unique relationship, meaning it is one of a kind. Other people have their own unique relationship with God. So we have a unique relationship with the land, but we do not have an exclusive relationship to the land. Right? And so back from the Tanakh all the way up to today, we have a unique relationship to the land, but it is not exclusive to us. The goal is to coexist with others that are there as well. That is what the modern state is as well, and all the way back from the Bible. So more questions for Larry. So
John?
Thanks very much, Larry. I'm trying to just clarify a little bit the strategy of focusing heavily on religion. It's not. It seems almost self-evident. But when you look at opinion polls, even among the U.S. Jewish community, it's a significant minority who characterize themselves as Jews without religion. And when you look in Israel, I think it's true that, I don't know about polling data, but my impression is significant portion of the Jewish community really isn't particularly religious. So it seems, I'm just wondering, maybe something else significant is needed if you really want to get some sort of a universal, or almost, you're never going to get universal with all due respect. It's something closer to universal.
So for the benefit of those who are on live stream, John's question was essentially questioning the strategy of emphasizing the religious portion of this when many American Jews are not religious, and as we know, there are many, many secular Israelis who are not religious. And is there something more to be said here? I think the answer is that whether we like it or not, and religion is like a core part of Jewish identity. And we gave the world, the Ten Commandments. The fundamental precepts of moral behavior are set forth in the Torah and the Tanakh. And so, yes, it may be a lift, but I think part of what I'm suggesting is that the interrelationship of religion to our Jewish history and how the two of them merge and influence each other is a way to bridge the gap between those Jews who say, well, we're really not religious, we don't care, or, a very large number of Israeli Jews who are secular. It's part of our identity. The two of them are joined as our identity. That's my response. Is it going to be a heavy lift? Yes. Is the skepticism about religion confined to the Jewish community? No. I mean, Rabbi Harris's and Rabbi Megdal's, Christian colleagues, lament every Sunday to increasingly smaller congregations. Why aren't more people here? But, it's worth the enterprise. And Jewish religion is one of the things that has instilled the faith that has made us still here after 4,000 years of tourists. So, okay, Hannah?
Yeah, I recently read that Muslims believe they were divinely given that same land. It's the first I had heard about it, and I studied, Islam in college, and it was never mentioned. Is this something that has recently been dredged up, or is it a tenet of Muslim Islam? And if it is, how do we approach it?
Well, so Hannah's question is that she's recently read that there is Islamic teaching that the land of what we call Israel, or some would call Palestine, was originally and exclusively given to the Muslim people. And therefore, how do we deal with that? That's part of what Hannah suggested. She's read that that's part of Islamic religious teaching. So as poorly equipped as I was to deal with Rita's question, I am even more poorly equipped to deal with the subtleties of the Quran. Okay, but again, can I defer to you?
Sure. So I haven't heard that, but simple history will say that Lech Lecha Me'artzecha, right? In 2 weeks we'll read Lech Lecha. Date that at 3000 BCE, and we know that the revelation, Muhammad's revelation, was around in the 600s or so of the Common Era. So I don't think it was divinely inspired first.
No.
If that is, but I've never heard that as part of Muslim. That the common belief is that Jerusalem is the third holiest place within Islam, Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem, where it is Jews exclusive first. But again, out of both of our wheelhouses.
And
So,
then somebody else has
Sam?
you have an illumination on that question?
on-
My understanding is on the Islamic teaching is that once Muslim dominance has been established over an area, it then has to stay Muslim for the rest of the time. Now, I'm not a
Yeah.
Muslim scholar at all, but that's my understanding. So having once conquered that area, particularly since it has Jerusalem.
Yeah, so that would be what Nancy's saying is that once there is Muslim conquest, that all of that terrain, not just Israel specifically, but any part of Spain or any of the areas, are forever therefore under Muslim domination or so. But that would go for areas far broader than Eretz Yisrael. So I think, right? And I have heard that. So, okay.
How do you deal with that? If that is, whether it's something that was long established or whether it's creeping in now, how do we deal with that?
That's a good question to ask our colleagues at the mosques, right? That there's an interesting thing that is happening, which is the modernization, the westernization of Islam. And that's a whole different topic. But it's really important for us to understand what is happening within the Muslim world as well. We read about it as headlines, but we do not understand. Remember, there's 1 billion Muslims around the world, and in my contacts, my conversations within with people that are Muslim is that there's a vast difference between where people come from and their connection to Israel or Palestine, what the issues are, if you are from the Middle East, if you are from different regions of the world. So it would be an excellent conversation for different experts to be talking about that. But I think Jen was next, and then...
Jen, let me just add one word, okay, because part of this recital about what has now become the definitive narrative that you hear on college students from essentially groups that claim to be pro-Palestinian, is word for word revisionist history and counterfactual, okay? So I think the first step, as Rabbi Harris suggested, is let's see what we can learn from, colleagues within the Islamic Muslim community, okay? But, boy, we better look at that with a huge dose of skepticism. And if it appears that it's counterfactual, then it fits within the rest of the revisionist history that we're being treated to, which is poisoning, the Jewish spirit. Jen, you would.
So thank you, first of all, for what you put forth today in terms of educating our community and everything. I think one of the interesting things that has come to light for me is like really this big distinction about what it means to be Jewish when you're living in Israel and what it means to be Jewish when you're living in the diaspora. And I have, good friends who are secular Jews in Israel and who never go to synagogue and, were hesitant to come to a Seder even, but they're so deeply Jewish because their whole life is revolving around this Jewish kind of space of being in Israel. We have a different challenge of what it means to be Jewish in the diaspora, right? And how do we separate, or how do we combine, like you were saying, this concept of religiosity and history and culture, right? Because what is no longer maybe resonating, right, is this idea of, with the younger generations, is this idea of of conservative Judaism and obviously modern Orthodox and all that. They're still doing their thing, as they've always done. But we're, always grappling with this issue of like, what does it mean to be religious versus what does it mean to be engaged versus what does it mean to be part of a community, right? So how do we teach our kids, right, this idea of just having this love of being Jewish, right? Marrying those two ideas doesn't mean you have to necessarily I don't mean to be blasphemous in any way, but you don't necessarily have to keep kosher and have to be Shomer Shabbos and have to do all of those things to be what you might consider a religious and spiritual Jew, right? There's a million ways that Judaism can show up in the world and show up in our lives. And how do we inspire folks to want to be part of that without those sort of you're doing it wrong, or you're not really a part because you're not doing it this way or that way, right? And the more we can engage that, I'm sorry, this isn't really a question, is it? I just feel like there's so much potential here, and I love so much what you're saying, and we can. I would love to hear more if you have any marrying the practical, like what does it mean to be Jewish in the diaspora? You know what I mean?
So Jen had talked about the differences between being Jewish in the diaspora and being Jewish in Israel, with being in the diaspora being a collection of religion, culture, and history, but not necessarily having to follow all the mitzvot. Whereas in Israel, we acknowledge that the people who live there, for them, Israel is central. That's their identity. And I'm going to invite, if you'll forgive me, we have a guest that I didn't know was coming, who is from Israel, Amir, who, if you have anything to say, I invite you, since I met him in the Kiddush, okay? So, this violates the sacred rule that lawyers and litigators, do. Never put on somebody on the stand where you haven't asked them what they're going to say, okay? But in the spirit of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Bazeh, I'm going to take that risk. But let me kind of try to address it. And again, I think part of this is rethinking. I mean, American Jews, like other Americans and like Jews through history, have had this division. I mean, there are incredible religious leaders, our rabbis, our sages, from, the destruction of the Second Temple to now. I mean, we just read, and there have always been Jews who believe that the best way to survive is assimilate. Take as many characteristics as you can of the indigenous population and emulate it. And I think what we really need to rethink is the ability to say history and religion reason it teaches us that the marriage of the two, like all good marriages, as we heard in the service, the Devar this morning, are harmonious blendings. And we have to hesitate about, rejecting religious principles, and we have to hesitate about our wholehearted embrace of the culture that surrounds us. And if we could extract key elements, maybe that's part of the answer forward. Abir, do you want to say anything? I don't want to put you on the spot, but Israelis are not known for being bashful.
Referring to her question or before?
Anything, well, directly responsive to Jen, but maybe if it's before, let me make a suggestion. Let's conclude some of the questions here, and then I would be thrilled, with your leave, to invite you to come up and say anything in your mind, or say it from there, or check it. I mean, whatever you want. All right, other questions? Okay, Harley?
Okay, let me see if I can unpack this. As a cultural Jew, I look at this as a battle for survival. And you use the word revisionist to now proffer the suggestion that this was not Eretz Yisrael, it was someone else's property. But doesn't that seem to fit perfectly with many Arabs who believe that Israel has no right to survive in the first place? So using the fact that we're interlopers on someone else's property, does that lend credence, at least politically, to their argument that Israel has no right to survive?
Okay, so the question is, does, many, people who are on the pro-Palestinian side, and I won't use that anymore because I view myself as being on the Palestinian side in terms of people who want to live in peace without war and have the kinds of maternal and paternal bonds with their Israeli, but in many ways they have been victimized. But Harley's question is, doesn't this notion that we are interlopers and therefore, we have no right to, the land of Israel, does it, how do we respond to that? And I think the answer, as I've tried to frame, is that it's wrong. I mean, some things are based on lies. And, we can, as Rabbi Harris said, we can have a special relationship with Eretz Yisrael. But, the idea that we are interlopers, okay, is just, contradicted by, thousands of years of history. And you go to Jerusalem and you take the tour of the city of David, and you go to the Galilee, and you go to the Golan, and you see these incredible mosaic floors from 1,000 years ago, 2,000, 3,000 years ago. And, it is part of a narrative that has been remarkably successful.
The bigger the lie, the more likely it is to be accepted by the population.
Okay, what Harley said is the bigger the lie, the more likely it's to be accepted by the population.
Well, 48% of people in this country, and I'll leave it at that. But the bigger the lie, Goebbels said this very, I think, prophetically. He said if the lie is big enough and it's repeated over and over again, and a lot of people whose attitude towards Jews, they don't deserve this about, they deism. How do you get past that one? But when someone mentioned, it was a brilliant observation, that there seems to be a move within Arab nations, or certainly intelligentsia, that, hey, this is our land, you're interlopers. But that fits perfectly with the political point of view, that Israel doesn't deserve to survive. At least that's my thought of being a cultural Jew.
Well, thank you. And in the spirit of full disclosure, I have known Harley not only since before I could deliver whatever this was, but since I could read. Okay, he and I go back to kindergarten. And he has the class photo with the damaging evidence.
Look, to be honest, this is the first time I've met this man. But there's a perfect.
John.
John Simon, I just wanted to also ask or remind you that in the Torah, there's a conditional relationship, is there not, between the Jewish people and Israel? The land is conditional. That's the rabbi on that. That the Jewish people have to obey God's commandments or the land will spit them up.
But it doesn't matter. When you're lying, and it's said over and over again.
All right.
There's no lie here.
No, I'm talking about from the Arab point of view.
I don't accept that. So I just wanted to point, Rabbi, any comment on that? I've read that, the land will spit you out if you don't,
This is Larry's presentation.
Yeah.
I am only
we
I
share.
am only an advisor on biblical topics that arise, to be clear. So, but the question is, what do you take from that? Like, what's the point of bringing that? That is accurate, but what is the point that you're making?
that we've got to continue to obey or to act morally and to act in accordance with the laws that we were given in order to continue to have that land.
That I said before that there is unique and exclusive. There's also, the question is there conditional? Christians would say, yes, absolutely. The Jews broke the conditions, and there is a new covenant, right? That's what they believe theologically. Within the biblical realm, though, Jews don't believe that, but it's an interesting theological exploration. What you're referring to is that within the Torah itself, it says, if you keep my commandments, good things will happen. This is one of the places, is the second paragraph of the Shema. And if you don't, then bad things will happen. And in other places in Deuteronomy, it says, and you'll be thrown out. So for a full exploration of that, it would be exploring the rabbinic commentaries on that. Does that actually mean to be thrown out? Does that mean that when you were thrown out, that there was no Jewish presence there? So
I didn't mean that. I didn't mean it like a final thing.
no, but yes, that is that our relationship, just the Israelite relationship and later Jewish relationship to the land, is not simple. It is hard. We are supposed to be struggling with this, and that's just an example of how even within the Torah itself, that we have a complicated, hard, beautiful relationship with the land of Israel that far predates 1948. And I think Larry showed that it easily goes into the 1800s, but even goes far, far, far more ancient than that.
And let me just, and then Alan, let me just quickly add, I mean, from a political perspective, okay, the answer here is not that Jews particularly Israelis, accept the fact or the premise that you've cited that if we're behaving badly, we get spit out, okay? I mean, somebody talked briefly before about, or it was in the paper this morning, analogizing to indigenous populations in America. The treatment, I would suggest, of indigenous Americans was far worse than what is going on in Israel, even today, okay? And I don't see anybody saying, we should yield back the entirety of America to indigenous populations and go back to Europe, where the hell we came from. So, I mean, that's, if you're talking about moral precepts, that's tachlis. Alan, you had a question.
Yeah, I just opened up the Shema. So, and the sentences that pertain to that, the way I read it, and I'm just reading it from here, is take care lest you be tempted to stray and to worship false gods. I don't think Judaically we've ever abandoned wherever we have been God or gone to idolization of any other God or any other type of religion. And I'm just taking that directly from here, just openly. So I'm going to disagree and say, well, that those lines that are talking about straight out of Deuteronomy are about abandoning God.
Okay, so Alan's observation was that the lines he just read from the Shema, and that the issue of, leaving Israel straying is tied to idol worship. And idol worship has never been a part of at least anything approaching contemporary Jewish history. I mean, so, I also would say, we can't ignore, just as Jen had made the point about, the culture that we're in. So let's remember, honestly, that the Torah, whether written by God or inspired by God or whatever, reflected a cultural milieu where religion was the cohesive element, not only of Jews. I mean, Jan and I just got back from Greece, okay, and saw the Minoan culture, dating roughly contemporaneously with ancient Israel, okay? It's all about gods, okay? So that was the context here. And our old ancient religious leaders needed that linkage to sustain a cohesive society. And I think that's a point of difference. Barry.
Larry, I wonder what you and some of your AIPAC friends and other American or other Israeli spokespeople see as a future for the residents of Gaza. See if you can apply the ideas we've been talking about to a future vision.
Well, first of all, yes, I do contribute to AIPAC, but I am not active. I have been diminishing in my activity since they've radically changed focus, which they have. As far as my vision of the future of people in Gaza, I mean, I'm just going to speak totally from my own, point of view, not intending to represent anybody. I mean, I think that, there's got to be a period of time where, Hamas, first of all, Hamas has to be totally disentangled and can't exercise any meaningful influence on the people who live there. There's got to be a period of, again, education, not education imposed by Israel or the United States, but education by we've invoked other Islamic scholars, and there are other noted Islamic historians who have a different view. And their view is that Palestinians, whether they be in Gaza, West Bank, or East Jerusalem, have been brutally manipulated in the most, Machiavellian way by Arab leadership, Sunni first, and now Shia, since 1948. And there's got to be a period of education, and then a period of calm, and it's a period of, some future vision where there is a path to independence and self-determination. But how that occurs, it's not a tomorrow project. And I don't think it's a decade project, and it may not even be a generation project. I think it's a long time, and it's got to have to require major kind of reorientation on the part of the Palestinian people. And I would add, after October 7th, on the part of Israelis. I was struck, and just one last point on this. When you go to Israel, and two of the most amazing museums I found were the Rabin Museum, which is an incredible interactive museum. And the sign out front says Shalom v'bitachon, peace and security. And you go to the Begin Museum in Jerusalem, and it says bitachon v'shalom, security and peace. And the commonality is the phrase encompasses both, but the priorities reflecting their political differences differ somewhat. So, Ira?
Larry, I appreciate how aspirational your talk has been about it, but the problem is, although you did mention that you're not really talking about the current Israeli government, the problem is that the people who would be most opposed to what you're proposing are the extreme Orthodox in Israel, who are fighting the police so that they don't have to go and join the army in response to the Supreme Court decision that they are required to join the army, and Smotrich and Ben Gvir, who are government ministers who are doing everything possible to basically to take over the West Bank and to take over Gaza. And they are Orthodox, serious Orthodox. And so how do you address that?
So Ira's question is, the ultra-Orthodox in Israel are essentially resisting mandatory military service, and led by, Ben Gvir and Smotrich. Basically their positions are being defended, and what I'm suggesting is arguably too aspirational. How do you deal with the reality that Ira has delineated? And I think, the answer, and I don't want to sound apocalyptic, but the kind of focus that I've, tried to lay out is the centrality, importance of unity among Israelis and Americans within the Israeli society and between. And I don't want to invoke apocalyptically the threats that now, obtain with regard to Israel and with regard to the kind of virulent anti-Semitism which we're seeing in the States. But, if you try objectively to read this cycle of blessings and curses, having risen to this apparent zenith of power here in the United States, okay, and the remarkable miracles that people of Israel have achieved, we're looking at potentially catastrophic developments. I mean, and, the whole focus, and I'll just very quickly on this, the whole focus about the Israel-Palestinian conflict, it's been there and now it's been Hamas. Again, I'll invoke the Gianna and my recent trip to Greece. So it's not just about the gods, okay? You learn exquisitely about the repeated Persian invasions of Greece. And we learned that in 50 years from the time Cyrus said to the Jews in ancient Persia, you can go back and resettle Jerusalem, to the time of Xerxes II, when his aide, confidant, chief of staff, Haman, said time to get rid of the Jews. These vicissitudes can happen frighteningly quickly. And one answer to your question, and I think what motivated the Supreme Court, is we need to be united. And it has to transcend religious, obstacles, and it has to transcend historical obstacles. I mean, when Barry invoked AIPAC, when AIPAC used to have its global summit, there was always right next to those who were saying Israel should end, the Satmar Hasidic sect, who basically said there should be no Israel until the Mashiach comes, okay? I'm not going to deal with that.
Craig will be the last.
Okay, unless Amir wants to maybe say one thing. Craig.
First of all, this has been an incredibly great discussion in terms of...
Thank you.
So, in this last year, in my discussions with fellow Jews who are against this whole war, they blame Netanyahu. It's almost universal. They blame Bibi for this war. And I keep trying to tell them that this war goes way beyond October 8th. It goes way October 7th. It goes way beyond Bibi's terms as prime minister. But how do you argue that point that this war is the fault of Bibi Netanyahu and not the fault, that it's not the fault of Hamas? It's the Palestinians are upset because of what Bibi did.
Several points. Since Jewish settlers, quote, settlers, the people who founded kibbutzim and moshavim in the late 1880s, coming forward, most conspicuously in the Arab riots in Hebron in 1929, 20 years before the State of Israel was founded, okay, they attacked the Jewish quarter and killed many people, okay? If you go through this cycle of wars from 48 all the way through now, the only consistent theme is rejection by successive Muslim countries of the existence of the State of Israel. Okay? So the answer, Socratic method, is turn the question back on them. Do you believe that Israel has a right to exist as an independent sovereign state for the Jewish people? If their answer is yes, they have rebutted their precept because it goes all the way back. Is Netanyahu a problem? I think, again, you don't have to comment on this, Amir. Is Netanyahu a problem? I think he's a problem for Israel. He's a huge problem for American Jews because he offers a vision which is antithetical to a lot of what American Jews offers. But I would also suggest, and I recently had a conversation one-on-one with one of our senators from Maryland about this, who's not up for re-election, and the fixation on Netanyahu, as opposed to everything else, was amazing. And a lot of that is also related to the media, and it's not just social media. A lot of people I know are canceling their subscriptions to the Washington Post because they failed to endorse yesterday any candidate. There are other reasons for canceling the Washington Post. Amir, do you want to say anything, or Diana? Yofi, why don't you come up? Okay, because we are blessed by a surprise visit by Amir, I don't even know his last name, who's here from Israel. And let's have the dialogue between Israeli Jews and diaspora Jews. Toda Rabah.
It was very interesting, all of you. Very interesting questions. My English is not so good, so I try, but maybe if it will be too hard, I'll switch to Hebrew, but I was told that no one will understand, so it's really... First of all, what I'm doing here. I'm here with a friend, a good friend of mine, that he was in October, the 7th of October, he went to the kibbutzim. He was living in the Negev, right next to the kibbutzim. I was fighting there. And then after 2 weeks, he went in the first forces that came into Gaza. And there was a big explosion, and he lost his 2 legs and above the knee. And because in Israel we have only 12 people that have no legs above the knee in Israel. So we came here for a treatment. He came here for a treatment, they make him the prostate. Yeah. And we are now staying in Bikur Cholim. It's like a little house there, and it was a Shabbat, and I was looking in Google and synagogue, and just walking the street and step here. So this is what I'm doing here. And there was a lot of interesting questions. I'm not as Rabbi Harry is. This is also not my profession. But I think there was the second question, I think, was a woman over there that she was talking about when Jews came to Israel, and there was people there before when Joshua came, and so what's going on? How justified that we are here? And I think we hear these questions a lot, and it's somehow it's a one question, but it was here. Somehow in everyone here's stomach. And the last question was about Gaza and what we are doing about Gaza, and I can tell you what's in my stomach, because I think we don't have any alternative. We don't have any choice. And questions, there can always be questions. They were here before, and even if we were first, then so what? If we were being here first, they killed only 1,200, and we killed like 40,000, and the questions never end. I think there is only one answer, that we don't have anything else where to go. You are here, you live here well. I was like walking before 8 o'clock, and I was around the neighborhood. It's so lovely, and the trees. We don't have it in Israel. But you live here well. And like 8 years ago in Berlin, Jews lived pretty well. And 5 years ago in Paris, Jews lived very well, and things changed. And I think we have to have our own homeland. We don't have any alternative. It's important for us, not less than it's important for all of you, because no one knows what's going to happen in the future. And I think, and you know, in the nature, only if you are not strong, if you don't have a house, you don't exist. And Gaza, it's a good question. And Joshua, it's a good question. But I feel we don't have any alternative. And we fight. And we fight, we do our best to fight and to be there. We try not to harm people that don't harm us. And in Gaza, you know what happened in Gaza. Why all this happened? Because we let it happen, because we didn't want to get inside. We knew what they're doing. We knew they are digging the whole land there. And Hezbollah, we knew like 20 years we know that this is what they're doing. We came out from Lebanon to the more than their border, the recognized border. And they're digging from there, and explosive and everything, and arm, and we knew it. And we didn't do anything until it was like on our neck, and there was no alternative. And I think this is what we're doing, and it's not Bibi or Netanyahu or he, and I know people like to hate him, and I don't like him either, but I don't think he's it's not Netanyahu, it's not Smotrich or Ben-Gvir or the secular, and this is minor questions. And this is what I think, this is my 2 cents to tell you, and thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here. That I've invited Amir and his friends while you are here, we are here for you, and so in whatever it may be, and we hope that your friend's recovery is quick. I also want to thank Larry very much for today, and it seems appropriate to recognize yesterday we finished the Torah reading, and what are the last 2 words of the Torah? Kol Yisrael.